So I woke up about six. I woke up at 5:30, and I saw the news. Different people on Twitter before it hit the news. None of the news outlets had it. Human beings in Haiti or Haiti were talking about the assassination, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And then one person posted something that let me know that this president might not have been very popular. So tell me what happened. Give us the news, Vanya, and then let's talk about what it means.
Sure, no problem. So I found out around 5 a.m. this morning via WhatsApp, Twitter, that there were armed men that stormed the president's residence, assassinated him. The first lady was wounded. There were a lot of conflicting reports early on whether or not she had also succumbed to her injuries. The latest reports now are saying that she was flown out of the country and is in a hospital, possibly in Miami, where she's receiving treatment but is in still in critical condition. And you know, the situation in Haiti right now, it's one that's filled with a lot of fear and tension. Although Jovenel Moise was widely unpopular, there were questions around the legitimacy of his actual election and his presidency. And then within the past year and a half, there have been strong calls for him to step down because there's some confusion on when his mandate actually ends. And yet, despite all of this, I find, even I'm talking about it now, I have goosebumps, that everyone was very surprised, shocked. We didn't necessarily see this coming, although there will be some that will say that, you know, this was going to be inevitable at some point. There have been rumors in the past that there have been previous attempts of assassinations for the president. And all of this just really coming to head today. And the overwhelming sense, and what I'm hearing from on the ground in Haiti and just members in the diaspora, is that, you know, it's just really disheartening and it's sad, because there was a moment in time over the past few years where there was a lot of hope that Haiti would be able to build back bigger and better because of all of the outpouring of support that we received after the earthquake. And I was a part of that. I felt that a little bit, you know, between the years of like 2016 and 2019, it was a good time. We felt like the country was moving, people were visiting, there were conferences happening. And then in July 2019, all of it kind of came crashing to a halt when gas prices more than doubled overnight. And it was just really downhill from there. You had a series of scandals that plagued this president, from Petrocaribe, which was money that a loan essentially that were given that was pretty much all embezzled. And right now the feeling is just that, you know, whatever progress Haiti had made within the past 10 years, we've taken 100 steps back.
Moise,
Moise.
Moise. He had been governing by decree since January 2020, after the country failed to hold legislative elections, and the legislators' mandate had expired. And many people thought that, opposition leaders, that he wanted to return Haiti to a dictatorship. That wasn't sitting well with folk. The airport, of course, Port-au-Prince, Toussaint Louverture International Airport has been closed in the wake of this assassination. There's a lot of things happening and things said. And I just want to run it by both of you, and I'm imagining you both have family members there. But during his time as office, there was, of course, a lot of violence, political unrest, along with a lot of poverty. Haiti right now is the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. And this is a nation that literally changed the trajectory of America, changed the landscape of America. The revolution that happened in Haiti reverberated throughout the New World and shifted and changed the way a lot of things happened, including we got the Louisiana Purchase. But it also put Haiti in debt, because you were on the hook to pay back for lost labor. Freedom. Yeah, for having the audacity to be free. And I say, in many ways, you've been punished ever since. This nation has been punished ever since. And not to mention Trujillo and what happened with your brothers on the other side of the island, that island that you liberated. I feel like those of us in the diaspora, we have to stand in, not just in solidarity, but Haiti has to win, because Haiti's victory, first of all, long overdue, but it to me is a flashpoint or kind of a fulcrum for the rest of Black America, Black everywhere.
Mhm.
So we can't sit and allow this to continue. And the poverty part, absolutely not. So you both have family members there, Herve? You still have family
Yeah.
members?
Yeah, we a bunch of family. We still have homes there, so a lot. So just like I'm not on WhatsApp anymore, but I know what she's saying. Like early, you'll get these notifications because everybody uses WhatsApp over there. You get these notifications. I started getting the notifications early in the morning too. They were text messages and stuff like "Yo," and I'm like, "What are people?" When you get those text messages, something is like you get a whole bunch of these things, something bad is happening. I would say this, like going to what you said, what's happened with Haiti, given our historical significance in terms of the fight against the colonizer, is a microcosm. Like you've seen this happen from the slaves on the plantation when there is like, you got to break a slave, like that one is out of control. And they're like, we got to make a lesson to let all the other ones know that this kind of behavior is not accepted, right? We can't let this ideology or philosophy spread, which is what happened, right? We can't tolerate this. So yeah, physically, we were able to beat them at their own game and fight and win our independence by being as brutal as them, right? Learning to be as brutal and kick them out of the country. But they came out and elevated the game. It was like financially, we're going to punish you for the rest, right? We're going to isolate you. We're going to make sure that you're unable to maintain any sort of, trade agreements with other nations. You won't be recognized for long periods of time, and you'll have to pay us reparations. So imagine paying the colonizer or the enslaver reparations for your own freedom and so if you look at it throughout history, Haiti has been that kind of example that the colonizer uses. And they did this with what country was it in Africa? The same thing, that had a rebellion and kicked out all the colonizers, and then they isolated them.
Zimbabwe?
It was like, yeah, you don't do this. That's basically what they said. You don't do this, right? You guys, this whole thing that you're gonna, determine your own role in life, your own plot, your own way, that's not gonna happen. And people do not recognize the historical significance of that, in that it's not even taught in our schools. Like, as a Haitian kid growing up in New York City, I didn't learn about the Haitian Revolution, Haitian independence in school. I learned it from home, and I know a lot of people who are like, what? This happened? Like, yeah, homeboy, that happened. Like, we did that thing, right? Like, there's another way to go about this. And, to think that they've always meddled in our affairs, in our governmental affairs, they've always been behind. So, this assassination, although, there was this kind of overarching sentiment that, President Moise was unpopular, right? For you to think that this was like a simple operation, like, you don't assassinate the president of a country just like that. The same way that they kicked Aristide out of the country way back in the day, right? They had some mercenaries that were training in the DR and came through Haiti. Even here, people were saying these guys showed up and say they were DEA agents and had his guard stand down. Now imagine you're in your sovereign country and you're the president's security, and somebody would say to you, "We're U.S. DEA agents," and you would stand down. So just the thought that would be something that would be okay. Like, I don't care who you are, right? And that you would go in, assassinate a president of a sovereign nation, and then leave. And then there was rumors, and she probably tell you a little bit more, that these dudes were speaking Spanish, or some of these dudes may have been speaking English back and forth. That there's a lot of meddling going on in our country, and I think every Haitian has gotten to a point. It's just like, leave us alone. Like, get off our backs. Like, let us figure our own way out. Like, stop meddling in our affairs. Stop, like, get off of us at some point. Like, give us a break. So that's my personal sentiment. I speak to a lot of my brothers and sisters, the same thing. Like, we're tired. Leave us alone, man. So,
Dr. Herve, let me reintroduce you, Dr. Herve Damas. You can follow him at Damas Herve. And we have Vania Andre, who's here as well. Vania Andre. You can follow her at Vania, Vania Andre, spelled like Andre _ on the Twitters, and at the City NY. And Tanya Pinkins is here as well. As Dr. Herve is talking about that, I'm also very well aware that the United States supported, right, President Moise. And I, I always often think about the Duvaliers and America supporting the Shah of Iran, America supporting Saddam Hussein until they didn't, America supporting Osama bin Laden, literally with money, guns, training until they didn't. And it's kind of a conflicted position to be an American and understand America's reach and her power and what she does globally, and the meddling and the insertion. And I struggle because we pledge allegiance to this flag at the exact same time we're Black in the world, and we understand how the Blackness is oppressed everywhere. Vanya, how should we be seeing this in America's participation or role in what happened to the president of IET?
You made a great point a few minutes ago, highlighting the dual struggles, right, of a Black person, whether it's here in America or globally, especially tied to Black Lives Matter, and how, Haiti's independence really is a message that should be taught globally. And the reason why I bring up Black Lives Matter specifically is because I remember last summer seeing at many of the protests, whether it was in Brooklyn and Queens and Manhattan, Haitian flags. And these were Haitian flags that were being held up by people that weren't Haitian, but they understood that like Haiti, that flag was like the first symbol of what Black freedom and having sovereignty over your own body, your own country, your own nation, what that represented. So for me, I'm Haitian American. I was born and raised here. My parents were born in Haiti. I have that dual identity. And for me, the most important thing is for the US to understand that, one, yes, Haiti is a sovereign country and that they should not be meddling in our affairs. But I do have to say at the same time that us as Haitians, we kind of don't know what we want all the time, because I hear two narratives. I hear on one side, leave us alone, we're a sovereign country, don't meddle in our electoral process. And then at the same time, when things aren't going our way, we ask for the US administration to back us up in some way. So for example, there are calls for Biden prior to this to help get Jovenel out, because he did not agree to that. It's like, okay, well, then don't meddle. Right now, there are a lot of conversations about what are Haitian elected officials in the US, what are they going to do? How are they going to use their power and influence to influence what's happening in Haiti? You also have a large share of the diaspora that wants to be politically and socially involved in the country, but really doesn't have the ability, and the country doesn't have the infrastructure to allow that to happen. So, I think for those in the US, they should really be looking at what Haiti is going through as a great example of like what happens when the powers that be, have so many layers of control and layers of I guess like integration in a country, in a Black country that goes back historically so far, where we can say that this was a racist thing, where they did not want to see a Black country of former slaves succeed. And this is just all of it kind of coming full circle. We've had different iterations of this, between slavery, between imperialism, neocolonialism, all of this has kind of compacted together to create a constitutional, economic, and social crisis within the country. I mean, we're at a point right now where literally people in Haiti don't know who technically is the leader. Like, what's going on? We have several versions of the Constitution out. The head of the Supreme Court that should have been the next in line to lead the country, he passed away from COVID on June 23rd. The new prime minister that Jovenel Moïse had appointed last week, he has to be approved by Parliament, but Jovenel has been running by decree. So there's no way for Parliament to approve him. And then the current prime minister, in order for him to be able to say, yes, I am the de facto interim leader of the country, that also requires approval from Parliament, which is not intact, is not in session. So it's just a lot of chaos. And again, we see just a full culmination of different crises and what happens when the institutions that are meant to govern a country are not sound. And then that's what we see happening in Haiti.
I would like to go ahead.
No, I was
No, I
just
would
going to
like
give out
to
the
add to
number.
that. Okay, okay, give out the number. Okay.
866-801-8255. We're on the Karen Hunter Show. We're talking about Haiti, with Vania Andre, Dr. Herve Damas, and Tanya Pinkins. Go ahead, Dr.
So
Damas.
yeah, just to follow up on what I love it when you say Dr. Damas. No, just to follow up on what she was saying was one of the things that like has happened when I say and she's like there is two factions. There are people that feel like there's too much, we do need help, and others that feel like leave us alone. When I say from the leave us alone thing, it's stop exploiting us, right? Because we've had, for example, the UN troops were in Haiti for about 20 years. They just left last year or whatever, right? So you had UN troops occupying our country for over a decade or more, right? Then they leave, there's this vacuum. We're back to the same place. We're back in the same place that we are, right? We've got, you put in a dictator, right? Then the dictator, the people can't take it anymore. The dictator's forced to leave, and now you put a bunch of puppets in, right? We have an earthquake. All this aid pours in from across the globe, over $1 billion in aid. What happened to that money? A bunch of these people from outside the country came in, sucked all that money dry. What's there to show for it? Nothing. There's literally nothing to show for all the money that got poured into Haiti, right? And it wasn't, some people will say, oh, it's the Haitians that embezzled it. It wasn't. We didn't have access to a lot of that money got funneled through agencies and things. By the time it got to us, man, people were getting tents and military ready to eat meals, the MREs and stuff, right? But there was no, building of the infrastructure. We're talking about over $1 billion in aid. So, when I say that kind of stuff, it's like, you come in and instead of helping us, right, you make the conditions worse. You meddle or you do things and it's like, hey, I'm going to take advantage of these people. I'm going to misuse them and mistreat them, right? And that kind of stuff, it's just regularly going on. And that's the kind of stuff like, listen, if you're going to come to help, come to help. But don't constantly use us as a way to take advantage of disadvantaged people who don't have a voice. I'd rather you not come here and let us build from scratch and you come here and suck all the blood and juices out of us and leave us withering to die,
What's next? What's going to happen? Vania, Andre, you talk about there being this void. So now we have chaos, right? There's just this vacuum. You have assassination. Where's the due process? Who's going to, like, how does this country get back on or get on track? What needs to happen next, in your opinion?
I'm honestly not sure. Everyone right now, that's what's adding to the sense of fear, is that we don't know. And it's because, like I mentioned, we have a constitutional crisis because we have different versions of the Constitution out that have competing processes about who is next in line of succession. We have a political crisis because there isn't parliament in session. Jovenel was running by decree for the past several years. We have a social crisis because the people are fed up. There's violence in the streets. The gangs have literally taken over the country. And what's next is no one knows. What everyone is sure of, though, is that the next few days, the next few weeks is sure to be volatile as there's power struggles, as people try to figure out who is going to be the next de facto leader. We have the current prime minister saying that it's him, but technically right now we have the country is under martial law. So what I personally think needs to come next, and this may be an unpopular opinion amongst my Haitian friends, but I think there has to be some type of leadership and direction from the US. The Haitian elected officials that are in this country, and there are Haitian appointees within the administration that have their ear as close to the president as possible to help to try to shape what the policy is going to be moving forward. And then also we have to also remember that the gunmen have not been apprehended. We do not have a clear understanding of who is responsible for this. There are several theories, from whether it's DEA agents, whether it's some mercenaries tied to Colombia due to drug smuggling, if it's an inside job from the national police. there's no accountability. And part of what the next step looks like is making sure that whoever assassinated the president and attempted the assassination also on the first lady, they need to be held to justice. And I think that's a role that the US can play in helping with this investigation.
And there is a Haitian caucus in our Congress. They need to come together. I think that might be good. What of the billionaires that live in Haiti that have armed security? And there's a tale of two cities. While it's the poorest nation in a Western Hemisphere, there's some very wealthy people living, off the fat of the land, so to speak. And Herve, you said you have property there. Like, how do you navigate these spaces, and what do we do with that folk that are not really from Haiti, who are there, living lavishly on the beach?
Well, so anywhere that there's an opportunity to exploit people, there are going to be exploiters there, right? Because that's what they do. So you do have a lot of foreign nationals. You have people from the Middle East. There's some Syrians there. There's a big Taiwanese influence. They came over a while back and started doing their thing and start mining for precious metals. And so, people don't even know that we're sitting on like a gold mine of not gold, but like precious metals that are used to make semiconductors and other parts for computer chips and processors and things like that. That's in Haiti. There's oil that's recently been found there that these guys want to get their hands on. So there's it's always been a place where people have found, whether it was the land being really fertile, which is what made the colonizers first start dropping people off there and stopping there because of all the natural resources there, whether it's the ability to grow animals and crops there, to now finding all these things. Those dudes like the status quo, right? Because they're insulated from it, right? They're power brokers. And, I often argue with my Haitian friends, right, about the fact that, like, hey, don't say our country is like, so, I mean, we live in the US, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the US. There's gangs running the street in the US, right? There's like drugs running rampant. There's certain cities here that's completely unsafe. You would not. Now, they just try to overthrow the government here. I mean, let's not joke about it, but they literally just try to overthrow the US government here, right? So yeah, our country has a lot of issues, but these are not unique issues, and a lot of them have a lot of overlap. You will find a similar type of power dynamics, people who have vested financial interest in keeping certain people at a certain level because it profits them and it benefits them. They can pay their money, and their access allows them to create circumstances. So even if the country is in turmoil, and you see this is what happened in the US during COVID last year, where the richest of the richer got rich and rich and rich, right? While people were out of work and waiting for stimulus. Everybody else was waiting for stimulus checks and unemployment checks, right? Well, the billionaires like Jeff Bezos is worth like $200 billion now. I mean, it's a similar thing. There are parts in Haiti that are still doing well, right? So Port-au-Prince is the capital city, right? Large, densely populated, poor infrastructure. There's a lot of crime and violence there, but there are places out, Cape Haitian, Okap, which is where my family's from, is not, kind of like that. And there's some places in the provinces that are not like that, right? So, we also have to be careful, like, to not throw this blanket statement. But those dudes, and as she mentioned, was like, there are theories that this could be an inside job, that it could be the power brokers. Those like, who shot Kennedy, right? Like, we still don't know who shot Kennedy, right? Yeah, so,
No, we don't. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
let's try to get, all right. No conspiracy theories. Freaking Oliver Stone, Damas. Stop it.
There's a magic bullet.
All right.